Yeah. So a few apologies. So I was on vacation for several weeks, so I wasn't able to help put the agenda packet together. So it's a little bit different than what you're used to seeing. So apologize for that. There's no budget and grants report this month because I wasn't here to put that together. And so there's really three items. There's a general update, which I'll get to in a moment. There's just an update on the proposed minor improvement grant changes. And then there's an action item request for the Washington Street streetscape improvement amendment to the urban renewal plan. So I'll start with just the general updates. You do have that in your packet. Again, it's just kind of a rehash of last month's because I wasn't here to update that. I'll give you some verbal updates on a few things. So on Southwest Court, there's two new vacancies. There's 119 Southwest Court and 168 Southwest Court. Those spaces are both available at the current time. Some updates on the ARPA building improvement grants, the 2022 grants. All but one of those projects are complete. The one remaining project will expire next week unless an extension is requested. So 7 out of the 8 projects are complete for a total expenditure of $69,902. And I should mention too that there's another project that is partially completed. That's done a partial draw. So I guess actually 6 of the 8 projects are actually completed now. For the 2023 round, so the current round, 2 of the 9 projects there are already completed. That's New Morning Bakery and Ward's Auctions. Those 2 are done for a total grant award of a little over $32,000. The Corby's project is essentially done. They're just getting all their invoices together. So we'll be closing up their project shortly. And then one of the 9 projects has not yet been their funding agreement. So let's have an update on those two grant programs. Just another update real quick. We're having the Luck Rail Node open house tomorrow afternoon in the Civic Center downstairs from 4 to 6 if you're following that project. And lastly, just an update on 791 Main, the bank property project. If you've been by there, you've noticed that the steel structure has been removed, the for sale sign is down. Security fencing has been installed. The parking lot was used for something during crazy days. I wasn't around during crazy days, but something was in there being used for that. Salvage operations are still underway. I'll be meeting soon with the city manager to discuss our process strategy going forward. And we'll be working on an RFP or an RFQ for the design professional engagement process. And as I think I mentioned before, we received a $60,000 brownfields grant from the state for that project. So those are just some general updates. In your packet also, you have, again, a rehash of the staff report on the minor improvement grant. That passed out of this committee, went on to the agency, and the agency unanimously approved it. So those recommended changes were adopted and they are now in place. So thank you for your help getting those moved forward. So the final one is and I apologize again, there's no staff report to accompany this, but there's a letter from the Dallas Downtown Association with Brian Dalton's signature on it. Should come as no surprise because I know he's been talking about this for a couple of meetings prior to tonight, but this is now formalized through the DDA board to request a minor amendment to the urban renewal plan related to the Washington streetscape improvements. Essentially just changing the geographic scope of that project a few blocks. Can't remember exactly what was stated in here, but I think it just basically takes out the reference of Main to Jefferson. And so it is basically the whole boundary of the district along Washington is now what is proposed to be changed in the plan. So So that would be considered a minor amendment, and it would just require recommendation from this body. If you want to recommend approval on that, that goes to the agency and then they approve it. And then the plan gets amended, and that's how that process works. So all I got.
Question. Does this change have any conflicts with ODOT? Referring to Washington Street, which is a state highway?
It's a good question. It's already included in the plan, and so extending it a few blocks, I don't think that would make any difference. We could certainly check at the appropriate time. I don't think we need to worry.
Well, I know there at one time there was a thought of having 2 lanes eastbound going past Jefferson, with one going straight and the other turning left onto Jefferson.
Yeah, and of course, as I think you're aware, Mayor, if we down the road, if we're successful with the mill site redevelopment plan to extend the couplet, Main Street Jefferson couplet south, that'll change the characteristics of how Washington functions in that area too. So there's lots of potential.
I just would need
changes
to do some changes and find out that they're going to undo them.
Well, and again, we're not, and you're right, but we're not specifying any specific detailed engineered plans at this point. We're just proposing to change the scope. You bring up a good point. It is part of the state highway system. At least there's a section of it that is anyway.
Right.
So, Marlene.
So when I read through this, this isn't anything new. I mean, Washington Street was already included sort of generically in it all, but this is just making the language more specific.
No, what they're proposing. So what was in the plan before was a very limited geographic scope of Washington, which was just essentially one block.
Jefferson
And what the DDA is requesting and what Brian has come to this body previously to talk about was extending it the full width of the boundary of the district, which is Jefferson to Levin's Church.
You should have heard 11th Street on that.
Yeah, he did.
It was some yeah, would include that block on left.
Yeah, so that's what's being proposed is just
If I
extending.
understand this correctly, this is just to include streetscape as a possibility by the agency recommendation from the committee to make adjustments or to approve the streetscape for Washington Street from Jefferson all the way now to 11th Street.
Right, it's already.
Let's do it.
It's already a project that's in the plan. It's just modifying the geographic scope of that project. That's
It
already.
doesn't require that we have to do it. Only if we have funding to do it, so we.
Well, if you have funding and the agency,
Permission to do so.
it just allows it in the plan.
Isn't the north side is automatically still in the plan, and we're just adding the south side of Washington?
The south side's in the plan as well. We're not changing the boundaries of the district.
No, I'm talking about the work on
Oh,
the
I don't
street.
I don't think the plan designated or referenced south or north. Did it?
I thought it did somewhere, but I don't know where.
I don't have a copy of the plan with me. I just have the reference to the plan that was included in the DDA letter. So I don't.
I think there was talk goal of improving the sidewalks on the north side, which need it pretty bad.
So did your
As
recollection?
I'm recalling that they were talking about the sidewalk improvements on
On
the
the
north side.
north side.
In the plan, though, I don't see any reference to north or
I
south
don't-
designation of the street.
That's my recollection as well. Do you have it in front of you?
Yeah,
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, this is just when we were doing the walking tours of sidewalks
Okay.
that needed to be
Yeah,
repaired.
but the way that the plan actually reads, there's no reference to north or south.
No, there's it's just for the streetscape, it'd be basically for the sidewalk improvements and or curbing improvements or something like that, nothing. Kind of basically what we did down
Right.
Main Street.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's a template out there that we've,
Yes.
been
And
following.
already
So-
adopted, we've got a program that
Yep.
we've got in place to
Right.
make changes to streets as they come up.
Right.
We've got some other streets like Oak
Mhm.
that we could.
Well, there's a number
also
of,
address.
obviously, there's a number of streets in the
Yeah,
district that
exactly.
you could potentially focus
But
your.
we're not making a recommendation to make changes right now, it just gives us the ability to do so.
Sam has.
Yes, Sam.
So kind of two questions. One, so there's 2 blocks of streetscape improvement approximately. If something were to happen, like what happened on Main Street or Jefferson, what would the approximate cost of something like that be?
Well, we haven't run those numbers, but the last project we did was like between $1 and $2 million, I believe, for that section of Main Street, which was 2 blocks.
Okay. So with that in mind,
Costs have gone up a lot since then.
Yeah.
in your professional opinion, because I don't know most of the members of the agency, but if we were to recommend this, do you think the agency would see that as us recommending a shift in priorities from the bank property to this?
Well, I don't see it that way, and unless you specifically call it out that way, that would not be how I would present it. I don't see it that way at all.
Sam, that's why I was asking questions the way that it was, that it doesn't force us to
No.
take action. It just gives us the ability to do so if and when we have funding.
I mean, the reality is, you will not complete all the projects in the plan
No.
when the agency is sunsetting. I mean, you won't. And so as we get closer to the end, we'll be prioritizing, as we have limited resources, what we are going to fund and what we're not going to fund. And that's part of the job here. And we have limited resources and we have to prioritize what we can actually do. So in my opinion, this doesn't bind us to anything. It just allows a little bit more flexibility when we get to that.
Sure.
Getting into the language of the proposal, because I assume this would be the proposal that would go to the agency. In it, they say the west boundary of the urban renewal instead of the street levens. And I presume that's because on the map of the district, there's a property that is not in the district on the corner there. So it doesn't fully extend to Levens. Is that a correct?
Yeah, and that's,
Okay.
without looking at the map, but that's kind of what I was thinking as well. So I think this is an accurate description, the way it's stated, because it would go to the west boundary. and we
Right.
Wouldn't be able to go beyond that.
So then I guess my question would be, because the language specifically references Jefferson Street, but there are some properties east of that. Should the language then refer to the eastbound?
That's a good,
East side of
you
the
make a
boundary?
good point, and I think that would be more appropriate language. It'd be a lot more accurate. Because there could be some conjecture when it just says Jefferson Street. Well, which side of Jefferson Street? Does it include the full intersection? So it might be a good idea to be clear on that.
So the Tracy House is not in the.
Well, again, I don't have the map in front of me, so I don't recall.
In fact, it goes up, the boundary goes up to the mortuary on the south side. But it cuts off where that new, the
Veterans housing?
had that little shop there,
Mhm.
the new ex-new, I think is what it was called. That would be included in the boundary. That and Center Street Market are included in that, but Tracy House is not.
Yeah.
Now, on the east side, it goes down, let's see. On Court Street, it goes all the way down to Shelton. And then it comes up, goes south on Shelton to a part where it jigs into the parking lot that's next to the EMT.
Mhm.
It removes that parking lot from it. And then it goes then further west. At mid-block. And then goes across Washington Street, and takes the Chevron station. And what's his name's house that's next to the Chevron station,
The cleaners.
Buchanan, is it?
Oh, that, okay, yeah,
Buchanan's house.
the old one.
And it kind of splits the lots in half. The rest of the way south, it goes all the way to Clay Street. And the boundary that goes from Clay west to Church Street goes halfway down the block to Church Street and then goes west again. to the backside of the mortuary.
I think it's following the central business district
Yeah.
zoning map. is
So it
what
kind of
it's
jigs
doing.
around there, so it's a little difficult to really see, but what this is including is the district from midway, the block midway between Jefferson and Shelton to midway between Church and 11th Street. But it does include the sidewalk on the south side of Washington Street, all the way to 11th Street. And it would also include the 11th Street, block 11th Street to Clay. Just tap that block, so it's kind of a weird
Yeah.
thing. And like you said, the chance of us doing all of these projects is gonna be.
Well, that kind of butts up against the new mill. Boundaries too.
Yeah, they
Just
do.
stops at Clay Street.
Yeah. That's good. Ben, could you make a note, if you would, for future meetings, let's have the map up on our screens, because we have the technology to do that, then we won't be
It's
guessing.
a little hard to visualize exactly what.
Yeah.
We see for the district.
But
So I'd just like to include that language
yeah,
to,
so Trevor has a good recommendation, I think, of, clarifying the language a little bit. If you guys want to move forward with that.
It should be from the east boundary on Washington Street to the west boundary on Washington Street.
Yeah, I think that's a clearer way to say it.
Okay, so. Make this.
And do you have to say on both sides of the street, or is that?
Well, I think that's implied, just, as long as the district boundary includes both sides of the street, this would include both sides of the street.
Well, I know when
And
Bill,
that could be, that just indicate that based upon the district boundaries.
because I know when Bowman's redid their building and put new siding on. They had to get a special permit from the city because that siding extended the building out onto the sidewalk right away by inches.
Yeah, that happens sometimes.
So if we were to go ahead and redo something on those sidewalks,
Yeah,
we may have to take off siding of the building.
we're
That's a fun
bridge
project.
to cross when we get there, yeah. But it is implied that you cannot expend the funds outside of your district boundaries anyways. And it's implied that you're limited.
So from what I understand, reading the specifics of this. Is Washington streetscape improvements are a section in the plan that are basically identified as a need. And there was a specific boundary in there, and we're just trying to redefine or suggesting to redefine that. So that we don't exclude parts, because right now it's saying a specific amount. So if we just have this Washington streetscape improvements and the Washington streetscape improvements will encompass the duration of Washington Street within the boundary of the
Here's how.
district. I mean, that's all we need to say, right?
Say it
On
faster,
Washington
Ben.
Street, based on the district boundaries from the west to the east on Washington Street.
Well, how do
You
you,
have to have on Washington Street to say, on Washington Street, based upon the district boundaries from the west to the east. That way, it's based upon boundaries, it's not on any particular landmark or.
I mean, realistically, we can suggest streetscape improvements using these funds that aren't in the district, right? And that would be outside the scope of the district entirely. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like kind of just a,
And that would be public works.
so you could just, so there's a possibility, the agency could partner up with the city and, extend the project, but the agency funds would be limited within the district.
Mhm.
Well, we also have the property on the south side of Washington Street on the corner of Church and Washington, that's gonna be improved also, so there's gonna be a building going up there, which is gonna make a major change to the sidewalks on Church and also on Washington,
That's right.
so that's gonna be done by the owner,
Mhm.
so. And then, of course, that for all of those types of activities, it's based on the structures that have been set forth by this committee and the agency for improving those streetscape.
When you say improvements, does that include signals?
Well, no, it's just whatever's in here. It
Says
says,
that intersection is one booger of a.
well, I can guarantee you we'll never be able to afford signalization, so I don't know that there's a point even discussing that in my opinion, but. It talks about, what's referenced in here, assuming this language is, I'm assuming that the language that's included in the letter is verbatim from the plan, but I don't have the plan in front of me to verify that, but it says curb extensions, landscape medians, infill street trees, pedestrian oriented lighting. That's what's listed there, but there's, as is mentioned, there's already a template out there of what we've, been doing. So I think you just want to keep the language as simple as possible.
Yeah.
Right now it says the Washington streetscape improvements will extend on Washington. So I think what you might want to say is something like from the east boundary to the west.
Well, I would include, based upon urban renewal district, boundaries from the west to the east. Just leave it at that.
Well, that's
That
what
way you got,
Okay,
if you got a map, or if we extend the boundaries or something changes. Then it's automatically included in that.
right.
If for some reason the agency wants to extend the boundaries or change them, then we don't have to reword it.
Okay, so whatever wording you guys can agree to.
Does that make sense, everybody?
Works for me.
Understand? Okay, so,
Tori had
I have
another
a
question.
yes,
Since it's in the plan, I was trying to look up the plan too, but the link takes me to the new urban renewal area creation, so. I'm gonna have to find a way, or maybe that link needs to get repaired so I can actually download it and have it on in my books or something. How is the project listed in the plan? Because it's really just a formality of referring to this correct extension of Washington Street so that it's
Right.
incorporated in that project.
yeah, see,
I think Trevor's. got
So,
that, right?
yeah,
and the plan for Washington streetscape improvements, that's what you're looking for.
Yeah.
It says the Washington streetscape improvement will extend from Main Street to Jefferson, creating a gateway to the south entrance to downtown. Curb extensions, landscape medians, infill street trees, and pedestrian oriented lighting will be used to create a visual appealing and welcoming atmosphere that draws pedestrians to the area and strengthens connection to downtown. That's the way it's worded.
So it's the extension piece.
So the part that we have is will extend from that and extend from the western boundaries to the eastern boundaries of the urban renewal district on Washington Street. I think that's how it should be phrased, to keep it brief, but yet not restrict us if the changes made to the boundaries.
And did you get that?
So will extend from the western boundaries to the eastern boundaries of the urban renewal district on Washington Street.
That's.
So moved.
Second.
Another second.
That's a good way to motion.
So, Rich, you made the motion then?
Sam made the motion.
Clarify the language.
Based upon
Oh,
the-
you so moved. Okay.
still
moved.
Okay.
I
You seconded it,
seconded.
all right.
All right.
Okay.
Do we have any more discussion about this? We could beat a dead horse, but I think this is okay.
Is that good, Trevor? Does that meet your boundary? The way you define it.
Yeah.
Does that sound okay with you?
it's good.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. It's a recommendation too, by the way.
Thank you.
It's a recommendation.
Recommendation to the agency.
Who was my second?
Sorry. Yeah, me.
And that's important that it be a recommendation. You got that, that's what you put in your thing, didn't you say, recommendation?
I-
Yeah, I'm sure I thought I heard you say
Yes.
that.
Thank you, Rich.
Okay, Charlie, anything else that you have?
No, that's it, thanks.
Let's carry on and, my chair comments had basically to do with this here, and I see that we're making some improvements to this dysfunctional Bank of America building. Is that going on fine? Are they starting to remove things from the building and stuff like that?
Yeah, as I reported earlier, the steel structure has been removed, the security fencing's up, they're doing salvage operations.
Okay.
I don't know if I mentioned earlier, but, there are no hazardous materials in the building, which is gonna simplify the demolition process.
But that's all going smoothly and there's no major unanticipated events
According to plan.
Not until tomorrow or the next day.
until tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you'll get us an update next month on where it's at, and also, can you get us an update as to where we stand as the committee to start working on things and where we would fit into this next phase?
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's
Yes, Marlene.
So just sort of a follow-up on that. I know you said in your report that you'd be meeting to look at designs and all that. Can we revisit the discussion on what comes first, the chicken or the egg with this? I mean, how much input do we have as a committee to be able to make recommendations for what we'd like? I mean, there's no sense having an architect on board if we don't know what we want them to design.
Well,
But, or if that doesn't all happen, then we ought to just level it and get a developer in. I mean, I don't know how this process works.
well, that's what I'm gonna refine the city manager so that we're all on the same page, but my expectation is that the goal of hiring a design professional is to guide us through that process that you're talking about. And so we'll have some professional facilitation from the design professional to get us to where we want to be in terms of what we want to see as the design. So rather than us coming up with this on our own as amateurs, we're gonna have a professional help us through that process.
So that professional would say, okay, here it is, if it's commercial or mixed residential commercial or hotel commercial. I mean, is that all, he throws it out, he or she throws it out on the table and says, this is what it would look like, and we can begin to figure out then what we think the city
Well, that's-
needs, or,
That's not what I envision. What I
Yeah,
envision
what do you
is
envision?
the input of kind of what's on the table, what's off the table, will come from this body, and will also come from an advisory.
okay, so it's premature to offer any ideas or analysis now.
But you can offer it, it'll go in the minutes, but I mean, we're not there yet.
I know that, but I just didn't know what the scheduling is.
Ask that all of the members provide Ben with information and things that you'd like to see. I don't know if you had a chance to do that or not. I've taken the time to send Ben my ideas on what, like I said, like the first floor, X number of floors, first floor would be commercial, second floor would be, second, third, fourth would be residential, fourth floor would be offices, and the fifth floor would be more of a restaurant type of thing, or just a smaller building, which would be more like a suite or could be a home or whatever, but it could be several options. That's all I provided, and I gave them some pictures of exterior on what I think it would look like in our city, and the concept of way it would look, so it would fit in with our situation. I just went on the internet and said building structures of the 60s or whatever, and it gave you a whole bunch of pictures, and so I sent in the pictures of what I had. I don't know, have you kind of put that stuff together yet, or has anybody else provided information?
I haven't received anything else yet,
Other
but
than
we're
from me?
reflecting it all, yeah.
I would take the time
Yeah.
and do a little research and see if there's some things that you'd like to see for the building, because that's a good start. Because then it kind of sets a
Yeah.
focus and the theme as what.
I would encourage that actually, because right now just having that input from one individual doesn't really help us a lot.
No.
But if we had it from everybody, that would be helpful to kind of set kind of the sideboards of,
Yeah,
this is what's on the table, this is what's off the table, and we can kind of coalesce that, and
Okay,
assuming there's some consensus, we could actually move that forward, and that would give the design professional a little bit of a head start as to kind of, this is where we want to start with, and so I wouldn't spend a whole lot of time on that exercise, but just think about, here's what I definitely want, here's what I definitely don't want. I think you can just put it in two kind of groups, this is what I definitely want to see there in general terms, this is what I definitely don't want to see there in general terms.
that's basically what I did. I just
Yeah.
was very brief about this, kind of like taking a building and saying, this is what, they didn't specify what kind of commercial. I just said commercial.
Right,
I said,
for interrupting, but I've got fire crews everywhere and I've got to take these calls. I'm
so
sorry.
I don't know if I mentioned at our last meeting. Looking at Tyler and I took a little field trip up to the city of Tiger. Did I talk about that last meeting? So we learned that Tiger has a similar project underway up there. Where the urban renewal agency bought its property, demoed the existing building, and worked with the developer to build a new building. Very similar site size, very similar building footprint size to what we're looking at here. Beyond that, there's not a lot of similarities, because if downtown
what's
Tiger,
this property at?
it's right in downtown Tiger, it's right on the
Okay, so
creek.
it's- Okay.
Yeah.
I was,
Um,
lived in Tiger for 20
yeah,
years.
so-
Okay.
That's where the kind of the similarities between, Tigard and Dallas really
Yeah.
stop, because even though Tigard is a much bigger city than Dallas, their downtown is much smaller.
Yeah.
Doesn't
Their
really
downtown is
have,
basically Dallas.
they don't really have any historic buildings in their downtown, so their architecture is kind of willy-nilly, there's no real theme. So, but one of the things one of the biggest takeaways, or one of the bigger takeaways, I think that we got from that was, they had initially looked at like a 4 or 5 story building, and they couldn't justify it in that market. So they went with 3. So it's commercial on the ground floor, 2 stories of residential above it. So just acknowledge that. I mean, we've all been talking 4 or 5 stories, and it may work out that way here, but just know that it may not. And the market will determine that.
Thing about Tiger is that there are a lot of hotels and motels in the area. So they don't have the motel issue that we have.
Correct.
here in Dallas.
Right, theirs is
That's why-
residential. Yeah.
I was looking at a little bit more for a hotel or residential.
And I think you're right. I
And so
agree with
there
you,
was some differences in that respect.
yeah.
So.
I
yeah,
think if you're-
would- Yeah, get
So, yeah.
something down on paper. Mine was all about a page and a half.
So let's target that for our next meeting, and we can have that
Yeah.
discussion and kind of maybe set some of those sideboards and kind of what's negotiable, what's not negotiable, what's on the table, what's off the table. That would be a good discussion to have at our next meeting.
Perfect.
I've had several conversations in this topic, and it's not known for sure if the city is going to demolish the building and then sell it to a contractor or developer, or if the city is going to build it themselves.
City's not gonna build it ourselves. That would be way too expensive to do.
But there's these options, conversations going on.
Build it to our specifications.
Well,
Or to the agency specifications.
Well,
was,
to the contractor can do what he wants.
yeah, once it's sold,
Yeah.
we can, we can set
Guidelines.
we can put together what's called a developer, agreement, and have some, limitations and some deed restrictions, but we won't be the property owner.
No, and they may do some market research and they may find something entirely different.
That's right. That's why, so we gotta be careful, because we don't want to put a developer in too tight of a box.
That's why I did my outline, was basically just general.
Right, and I would encourage that.
Yes,
But if there was something, let's say a hotel is what we wanted, and that was kind of a consensus, just for an example, wouldn't that allow you then to specifically go out and search
Yes.
for those people?
Yes, and
I
that's the
mean,
kind of direction I think we want to see, is because I see some forks in the road, and one of those forks in the road is what happens in those upper stories. do we want it to be a hotel? And if so, you're right, that's gonna dictate the direction we're gonna go. Do we want it to be market rate residential? And if so, that's the direction we need to go. And that's will be two different kinds of projects. So. And we may fail, and that's okay. I mean, if we all decide it's a hotel, when we go out to try to attract a hotel, we can't get any interest, then we have to fall back and try plan B, and that's okay. But it would be helpful, you're right, to decide which direction we want to go.
We don't want to fail like Independence. failed.
We definitely don't want to feel like independence. Yes, indeed. That's why you gotta-
never fail.
That's why we'll have to, really vet our developers.
Years ago, the Economic Development Commission did some research and trying to see if we needed a second hotel motel in Dallas. The study came back saying no, 100% no. Well, the people that own the motel in Monmouth got tired of sending people to Salem when there was college events in town because football games and various things, and no place for people to stay. So they came to town and built a hotel motel here. It's been very successful.
Well, look what Independence has done, in more recent years.
Yeah.
It's a good example. The good example of independence that I'm talking about is the hotel.
Do we have any kind of studies or analysis that we can base those desires off of?
Not at the current time, and part of the reason is because those types of analyses tend to go out of date really quickly. And so if we'd have done one in 2020, let's just say, it would be of little value right now. So I think there's going to be an appropriate time to do that, but not till we get much closer.
Okay.
And this is where we, at this first stage, can kind of give an idea of what we'd like to see. And then Charlie can use that information when we get further down the road. He kind of focused on those things and then bring us all together so that we could see the big scope of things and then start dealing with the little things.
Yeah.
And
And
that's
it
where
is-
this kind of
Yeah, it is a chicken and an egg thing. We've got to start somewhere. And so
yeah.
I personally like the idea of starting, what is the community willing to support? Then we can see if reality supports our vision rather than the other way around. And we could go the other way around, but my preference would be to go the way we're talking.
And a lot of my comments came from friends that live in town and stuff. So Marlene,
Well, to Trevor's question, I know I've been putting together a study for a hotel and I met with Jane Holmbeck, the architect, of how many floors and et cetera. But just based off of 30, I got no end of data from Travel Oregon. Just on the hospitality, how much money they make. So it's the average. You can go on their website and they tell you exactly how much the Willamette Valley makes over the last 5 years, and the last month. And I mean, and just briefly from that, it came up that there were 30 rooms of a hotel. It would add with the lodging tax, it would bring $81,000 a year tax into the visitor center. So that's a pretty good return.
yeah,
Mhm.
sounds like.
Plus you're getting taxes from the whole building.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Sure.
but I got all of that just from looking online of Travel Oregon, and I'm sure there's other, if you want to look at businesses and stuff, they've got all
Well,
that.
Get our
outlets.
ideas together and we can start moving in that direction. Are there any other member comments?
I had a member comment.
Sir.
Altogether. So just from being part of Crazy Days, for the last weekend, I noticed a lot of the streetscape improvement projects that we had accomplished over the years were very beneficial to that event in the downtown, the success of that. And I just wanted to make sure to put in the record some of those specific things that we might consider in the future, especially if we do something down on Washington Street to try to include that area in things that increase pedestrian traffic and whatnot. One of the primary ones that kind of shocked me a little bit was the little cutouts that the county did on their lawn where they put concrete, which turned into seating areas and attracted a lot of people to sit and hang out while there was still pedestrian traffic up and down the sidewalks. And so it didn't inhibit that. It was very effective in increasing the number of users. And then, of course, street trees. Everywhere there was a street tree, there was people sitting under it in the shade because it's summertime. So just some things to keep in mind as we try to improve the downtown in the future.
Well, thank you. That gives a lot of credit to the committee and the agency. Because we spent a considerable amount of time. Right, Robert?
Yes,
spent a lot of time thinking about what we need to do to the trees that we want. We didn't want trees like that were 40 feet tall, but yet were nice and shaded trees. Those shorter, so little things like that really do help.
Mhm.
But thanks for bringing it to our attention. It is in the record. Anybody else? Well, is there any other business? Next meeting will be September 6th.
Which is a Wednesday, because of the holiday.
Okay, so Wednesday, September 6th. At 5:30 PM. And unless there's any other business. Meeting adjourned. Go sit in your recliner now for a little while.
Let's see.